Welcome to the Weaver Sews. I'm Daryl Lancaster. I'm taking you through a step-by-step process of creating this warm, cozy tunic with a hood and drop shoulder sleeves. I'm making it from this gorgeous hand-dyed and hand-woven wool plaid. In previous videos, we have added a nylon tricot seam finish to both the front and back panels of this shirt tail tunic. We've created a placket opening in the front and added a kangaroo pocket. The next step in construction is to attach the front to the back using a separate yoke. But first, we will create a pleat at the center back, which creates volume in the lower back for fuller hips, and a decorative loop, just because. Let's start with the pleat. A pleat starting just below the shoulder blades, when used with a yoke, creates a smooth line across the shoulders but gives a bit more room in the seat. This is a typical feature of Western style shirts as seen here. The back pattern piece has match points, 2 sets of dots on either side of the center back. I've marked them with tailor's tacks, which are easy to see from the right side. We covered tailor's tacks and marking match points on a hand woven in a separate video. From the right side, bring the dots closest to the center back to meet the dots to their left or right. This creates a pleat in the center back. The folds of the pleat should meet at the center back on the wrong side. Machine based 1/2 inch from the cut edge to secure the pleat. This little loop, which is a turned tube, is of course optional. I'm not sure why I love it so much, but I always include it when I make this silhouette. This little decorative loop can be from the same fabric as the tunic, if it isn't too bulky, or it can be from a contrasting fabric. There are lots of ways to create a turned tube. For best results, start with a bias strip. The pattern shows the dimensions for this particular application. I used a 1 1/4 inch or 3.1 centimeter bias strip, about 5 inches or 12.5 centimeters long. With right sides together, stitch 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter from the fold. Trim the seam allowances to 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter. I purchased a set of these brass tubes called Fast Turn many years ago. The full set is about $60. This is one of my most treasured sewing tools. I look for opportunities to turn tubes all the time. Single tubes are available for about $12 each. I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter tube. To all my viewers who do not live in the United States, I'm not sure how available this product is since they seem to only ship domestically. Insert the brass tube into the stitched bias strip. It should be a snug fit. Stop the brass tube just short of the end of the stitched bias strip. Insert the appropriate wire in the lower end of the brass tube, and it should pop out the top of the bias strip. The corkscrew wire will screw into the edge of the fabric. I find that with more ravelly types of fabrics, I like to twist the corkscrew wire through the bias fabric, catching some of the stitching for the seam. Begin to gently pull the wire back through the brass tube, and the bias strip should start to invert through the tube. Keep the bias strip where it inverts, snug against the rim of the brass tube. Don't get ahead of yourself. Gently help guide the bias strip up and through the brass tube. Continue guiding the bias strip through the brass tube until it comes out the lower end, still attached to the wire. Gently untwist the corkscrew to remove the wire. If you wanted a rounded, stuffed look to the tube, you can easily hold a bit of stuffing material, like cord or fat yarn, against the rim as the bias strip is turning. And it will just be pulled inside the bias as it turns. Trim the finished loop to 3¼ inches or 8.25 centimeters. Place the bias loop over the pleat, having the cut edges of the loop even with the cut edge of the top of the tunic back. Center the tube over the back dots. Machine baste in place along the seam line. Now we're ready for the yoke. This yoke is lined. It makes construction a breeze. You will note on the yoke pattern that the yoke piece can be cut on any grain line, crosswise, lengthwise, or bias. This also helps when you want to match design elements. Since the center back of the tunic has a pleat, matching design lines vertically would be impossible. I cut the yoke for this hand-woven fabric on the bias. And this one is crosswise. You'll want to interface the outer yoke. I've interfaced the hand-woven yoke with a fusible knit tricot. Even though this yoke was cut on the bias, I cut the interfacing on grain that is parallel to the knit structure of the interfacing for stability. However, this raw silk yoke is thin, and fusing interfacings on thin silk can be somewhat problematic. I prefer a sew-in interfacing, in this case silk organza, which I machine basted to all the raw edges. I've stay stitched both yokes in the direction of the grain across the shoulders and the back neck. In addition, you'll need a yoke facing or lining, which can be cut from a contrasting fabric. It won't be seen. I'm using a linen for the hand-woven fabric, cut on the lengthwise grain, and for the raw silk version, I'm using the same raw silk fabric since it's so lightweight. Stay stitch the yoke facing as well. With right sides together, pin the interfaced yoke to the top edge of the back, matching the dots. Machine baste the two together on the seam line. Well,
Tell us about it.
bye. Pin the right side of the yoke facing or lining to the wrong side of the back, matching the dots. We are making a yoke sandwich. With normal machine stitching, stitch through all the layers on the seam line. Press the yoke and the yoke facing away from the back towards each other. Turn under the 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter seam allowance on the shoulders of the yoke facing and press. Now we get to add the front. With the right sides together, pin the front shoulder to the back yoke shoulder. stitch a 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Press the seam allowances towards the yoke. If I were making the tunic with the stand collar, as in this version, I would bring the yoke facing shoulder seam line. Hi, Mulder. I would bring the yoke facing shoulder seam lines to meet the shoulder seam lines of the tunic. Pin and top stitch or hand stitch in place. Then I can machine baste the yoke necks and armhole edges together. But I'll be adding a hood to the hand woven tunic. So we will leave the yoke facing unattached at the neck and shoulders at this point. And that's as far as we can go for this video. Next time, we'll add a hood, and then the front placket and the yoke facing can be completed. I'm Daryl Lancaster for The Weaver Sews.